In 2002, DICE released into an unsuspecting world their game Battlefield 1942. In many ways it was a genre-busting game. It did large battles on a scale never really done before, provided planes, tanks and men all on the same battlefield, and gave you weapons you needed to deal with each foe accordingly. Bear in mind that this was really the early days of the internet, so word of mouth was a big thing for game players and also for dev teams. Good word of mouth could catapult you to massive sales. Bad would mean your game would sink like a stone. Battlefield Vietnam poked its head out in 2004. Similar gameplay, accompanied by a classic soundtrack of game-era defining music. Every player of Battlefield Vietnam now has a hatred of White Rabbit by Jefferson Airplane, as that song played over the menu for the game. Then in 2005, only 1 year later, came the release of Battlefield 2. Using a new graphics engine, it was set in a modern combat era, and this game took off in a massive way, provided DLC with Special Forces, Euroforce and Armoured Fury. It also spawned a very popular mod called Desert Combat, which was played a great deal by the community. Following on from that in 2006 was Battlefield 2142. Set in the future, it involved mechs, shielding and mad weaponry, as well as a new game type, Carrier, where the teams fought for the survival of their carriers and the destruction of the enemies. 2008 brought us Battlefield Bad Company, but it was its sequel in 2010, Bad Company 2, that really captured the multiplayer community in a big way and is still even played today. Then, another game changer came Battlefield 3. Set in modern combat times, this came with a new game engine, Frostbite. It proved to be a massive hit. However, the lack of spectator mode and support mods really put a sour taste in the community's mouth, and some worried if this was to be the future of the Battlefield series. In addition, it was not a smooth release. Problems were all over the place on release, and it took a while for the game to stabilise. Also, was the release of Battlelog, a web-based interface for the game and configuration settings and server browsers prior to getting into the game. Reaction was negative to begin with, but as usual with most gamers, they bitch and complain about a thing and then adapt, get used to it, and in some cases enjoy it. Over a period of 2011 and 2012, DLCs were released for Battlefield 3 that added in extra content, bug fixes and rebalances to the game that continued to extend the longevity of the game. Then, in 2013, came Battlefield 4. As many in the community hoped that DICE and EA would have learned from the lessons of BF3's rocky release, in short, no they hadn't. Battlefield 4 suffered from an even more bumpy road on release. There were blue screens of death even happening in professional competitions like DreamHack. It was another black eye for the publisher and the dev team. Eventually, bug fixing improvements were removed from DICE Sweden and given over to DICE LA, who proceeded to turn what was a buggy mess into a better streamlined game overall. So much so that Battlefield 4 is still actively played today by many people, including me. Additional DLCs were used, and also the use of Battlefield Prime, an extra financial cost that meant you got all the DLCs when released. But some in the community felt that they shouldn't have to buy the DLCs in order to play the game they've already bought. We move into 2016 with the release of Battlefield 1. With competitors like COD swapping between World War II and modern day, DICE decided to throw everyone a curve ball with a game based in World War I. Again, the DICE engine Frostbite continued to leap above most other games, and I can't deny it was an extremely pretty game. But some of the weapon choices seemed to be out of keeping with the World War I time set. A change was made to sniping, making bullets faster and sniping more rewarding. As a result, created a lot of new snipers in games where objective capturing was really the key. Some complained that the damage model made players feel spongy, could take many hits yet deal out massive damage to you in return. It made for many, including me, BF1 a very frustrating game experience. Also, there were changes where vehicles could repair themselves, even when flying. Felt it took away an experience for a lot of players and would increase reliance on other players to repair their vehicles. Being able to fly and repair at the same time, along with regenerating ammo, would only encourage vehicle camping and ruining the general gameplay for other players. You just have to look at the solo seat jump helicopter players in BF3 and BF4 for an example of a game mechanic that had a negative effect on enjoyment, except for everyone, minus the player obviously racking up hundreds of kills so he could brag to his friends about the size of his EP. Again, the community, including myself, hoped that DICE EA had learned from the experiences of BF1, but I was hesitant to raise my hopes. Sadly for me and many others, their fears felt justified when Battlefield 5 was released. It was not an enjoyable game to play, or at least not in the same way that Battlefield 4 was. It wasn't the rage fest that was BF1, but it still didn't scratch the Battlefield itch. With the removal of 3D spotting, it made players a lot harder to see. Granted, in World War II for 1942, it wasn't there either, but graphics have significantly improved, making screen detail more cluttered, and thus making enemy players harder to see. I will admit I found the ability to build barricades, put up defences, etc. in Battlefield 5 to be a very enjoyable aspect of the game, and it definitely helped the other players defend points, but unfortunately that wasn't enough for me. Then, in 2021 came Battlefield 2042. What can I say about this other than, oh dear me. With the exception of Hardline, which I didn't really consider a Battlefield game, after playing the beta for 2042 after a few hours, my heart was broken. How could such a buggy mess of a game be released to the world? Then add to that the design decisions which clearly seem to defy common sense. For example, whose bright idea was it to remove scoreboards? I'm sure the mentality was, well, we want to remove the competitive aspect from the game and foster gameplay and objective play. But this seemed to be completely the wrong way to go about it. Scoreboards and keeping stats has been in since Battlefield 2, and this game is no different. You won't change the mentality of players just by removing something from view. It felt like something an angry parent would do to a wayward child. If they can't use it responsibly, we'll take it off you. As an engineer player in Battlefield games, I used to love the role and love giving enemy tanks a hard time and keeping my guys alive and healthy. So why was the game decision made in 2042 so that engineers could not equip a rocket launcher, key engineer weapon, and a repair tool at the same time seemed to be the height of madness. Oh, and covering game decisions, who thought specialists were a good idea? I know, let's rip out all the classes from the heart of Battlefield that made it a diverse game that we enjoyed and put in some crappy COD or Rainbow Six style specialists instead. Overall, Battlefield 2042 felt like a massive dumbing down of a franchise many players loved, and they walked away from it as a result, myself included. Battlefield 2042 is the first Battlefield game I have not purchased on release since Battlefield 1942, and that saddens me. To think how a franchise has slowly ebbed away to this shell of a game that is missing all the things that players love that helped make only in Battlefield moments. As a result of that, many, including myself, have completely lost faith in EA DICE to provide us with a good Battlefield game again. And that is the biggest tragedy of it all. To see a franchise that you have spent so many hours playing fade into obscurity, but not with a bang like Battlefield should, but with a barely audible whimper.